Do allow me to invite Dr. Rose Ngugi to the podium to give us her address.
In this third policy dialogue, where we are looking at not just the extractive sector, but one of a sector that is mushrooming. We are all excited in Kenya that we are joining the league of countries that are not only exploring, but also moving on to export. The focus today is on the petroleum sector. It's also good to know that extractives are beyond petroleum. We can talk about the titanium. We can talk about the quarry mining. We can talk about the gold mining. And it means, therefore, that health and safety issues, environmental issues, are not only for the big companies, but they are also for the artisanals and all those that engage in the extractive activities. But for this forum today, our focus is on the oil and gas. And it is because of the ongoing discoveries that we have heightened activities in the sector, and there is potential for more activity as we exploit the various stages of the value chain. Whether we are talking about the upstream, whether we are talking about the middle stream, or the downstream, at all these stages, there are very critical environmental and health safety issues that we need to provide policy guidance in coming up with rules and regulations, enforceable policies, and the like, so that we are all operating from a platform that benefits all of us. So what do we see growing in the sector? There is exploration still going on. We are happy that we are moving towards commercial production. There is transportation that has just been kicked off. Processing may be coming down the line. Manufacturing also could come, but more importantly is the consumption of the products from the sector. As we do the mining, as we do the exploration, we know that we don't do it in an open space. It's a space that is occupied by various communities. And for example, if one talks about the petroleum industry, we know that when we talk about Turkana area, we are talking about an environment which has, it's fragile in terms of the climatic conditions. And any damages that would cause to such an environment could have very devastating impact on the livelihood of the majority in the area, because they depend on the pastoralism activity for their livelihood. We know that there are also explorations offshore, and one cannot forget the situation that happened in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, where the Shell company found itself having to repair a leak that spilled almost 2,000 barrels of oil into the Gulf. Is it far-fetched? It could also happen into our country. That aside, recently, His Excellency the President, the Republic of Kenya, launched the early oil pilot scheme, flagging the first cargo for oil for exports, transporting crude oil from Turkana to Mombasa through road. If we look at the experience of our country over time, we've seen several people lose their lives when we have had oil tankers accidents. And this in itself means that we need to be vigilant as we expand the activities of what we are doing today. There is a planned pipeline to ease transportation of oil from the mining field, but we also know that Kenya has a pipeline network at the moment, and we cannot forget issues of the Sanai fire that was due to fuel spillage, possibly from the pipeline, and it caused actually it was devastating to the community. And I want also to come to you and I. We drive each day, many of us do. Each month, each year, we go to the garage, various corners of the country, and what you find is the spillage of oil that comes from the engine oil. And sometimes you wonder where this oil that is just kept at a very big tank at the corner actually ends up. And one has to think about, again, the environmental factor. And also, when we think about the petrol that you take every day for your car to move, sometimes we are told there is adulteration, which has impact also, again, on our health and safety as a driver. And I'm trying to bring all these to show that it's along the chain, the full chain, that our interest on environmental health and safety should come in. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that Kenya government is very, very committed, and the Kenya Constitution is very clear that the government has an obligation at both national and county level in ensuring sustainable exploitation, utilization, management, and conservation of the environment. And this is not just for petroleum, but it's also for the quarries and other activities that we are doing. And in this regard, the government has come up with various efforts, enacting legislations, and also establishing institutions that are meant to guide, implement, and ensure that we can continue with our lives without endangering the environment, but at the same time, without endangering ourselves. In mind is the Energy Regulation Commission. We also have the Directorate of Occupational Health and Safety, and also NEMA, which I now understand have been here, and I was looking forward to hear from them exactly what is going on in terms of protecting the environment within which we live. We cannot also forget that Kenya is a signatory to many international commitments related to occupational safety and health, which are integral to the decent work agenda. More importantly, if you think about the ILO, it points out that the challenge for the oil and gas industry is to be able to quickly and effectively respond to potential vast and serious incidences that happen in that sector. So the realization and enforceability of environment, safety, and health standards in the oil and gas is dependent on so many of us. You as a consumer, the other as a producer, and so many of us need to really think through in terms of complying with the national laws, regulations, standards of environmental health and safety. Oil companies have initiated voluntary programs such as Systems Approach to Health, Safety, Environment, as well as Responsible Care to address the performance of enterprises with respect to safety, health, and environment. It is also clear that public awareness is important to understand the implications of the inherent risks in the sector at all stages of the value chain. And the dialogue that we are having today actually is a testimony to the fact that all of us need to have the awareness, and we need also to create awareness to the others. As part of the Extractive Policy Working Group, one of the key things that would be important for us is to look through the various policies, regulations, and legislations, and ask the question, where are they working as we exploit the petroleum? Are they working in quarry mining? Are they working in the gold mining sector? Are they working in the titanium sector? Where are they working, and what can we borrow as we push the agenda for the petroleum sector? In this, I'm trying to say that beyond petroleum sector, there is quite a lot that we need to understand on environmental health and safety.
There is a potential for Kenya to consider moving away from traditional prescriptive models of legislations, where it's command and control. Do this or you get this ban. Do that or get this fine. Is there a potential for a performance-based model for legislations and policy, where you are actually getting into a conversation with your specific partners and get into a negotiation table of what is feasible within the realms of the project? And for me, obviously yesterday, after different guest lectures and different interactions, 3 things became clear. This is from my perspective, and also from the views yesterday. For a policy to make sense, for a policy to work, for a policy to be impactful, it has to be viewed from 3 dimensions. The first one is the policy needs to have a penalty agenda on fines. So you don't perform, you're penalized. Now, generally speaking, in African countries, and if you look at most of the Kenyan policies, and like you notice, there are quite a number of them, just stop at that point, penalty dimension. But the point is, the government is not supposed to be seen as a massive landlord with a big stick, where it scares everybody to death. And so there has to be a support dimension for those who cannot comply with policies, okay? That is the reason why you're a government, is to make it work. That's a second dimension. But I think most importantly, the ones nobody seems to look at, which in a sense is kind of impinges on the performance element, is the compensation dimension. So if they do well, then compensate them. And the different models of compensation, through tax reduction, through incentives, whatever it is. And so when these 3 dimensions are integrated within the policy dynamics, then there's a potential for implementation, because you are always in a conversation with the individuals trying to actually comply with the policies. Now, we agreed as well that EIA is like the big term everywhere around EHS. Have you done your EIA? Yes, you have. But see, EIA now gathers dust on the shelf after the project has begun. And so understanding the fundamentals for monitoring EIAs post-project, or when the project has begun becomes very important. I think in a sense, it's a new era in Kenya's extractive sector. And I think focusing on these different dynamics around how might you be able to articulate your policies, that it works. I mean, I told you yesterday, I just started counting, and there are over 35 legislations, different legislations that impinges on the EHS environment. That's a lot of legislations. And I don't know how many agencies that impacts on. EHS has to be done. It's multi-sectoral, multi-agency, but the point is, how can you achieve uniformity, a consensus around this? And so there is this agenda around driving EHS like you drive local content. And so general consensus on global model shows that a good way to address local content, which is now proven successful, is to get a uniformity of a central local content policy. But not just that, house the policy with a central singular authority to manage local content. Let it be their job to navigate which different organizations or agencies which wish to drive the focus. And I think potentially Kenya might also consider that within the EHS.
Government has? Companies have? Academia has? CSOs and citizens have? And who should lead the conversation? We are putting community at the fore. And to kick us off, we'd like to invite Mr. Becher Hadley to make his presentation on how to make EHS more inclusive and how to include communities in this whole EHS conversation.
When I look at this subject of public participation, it touches on issues of governance, especially the upstream petroleum governance, especially the organizational governance, whether it is at government level, at company level, or at community level. You cannot participate if at governance level in community you are not organized. Alright? You cannot participate if at companies there are certain governance issues or policies they are not existing within your policy environment. You cannot effectively participate as government if certain statutory are missing. So what I'm saying, the subject of public participation is a governance issue. And what is governance? It's just about the way it's about decision making. How do we make decisions on matters pertaining to environment, health, and management? How do we make decisions on matters pertaining to environmental impact assessment and the processes and the environmental management plans? How are these decisions made, and who is accountable for those decisions at the end? And if something goes wrong, who takes that responsibility? So when you look at governance, these are questions that we have to ask. But when you look at the elements of governance, policies, legislation, regulations, institutions, they are very important. So if we have to involve the public, in which of these policies are we capturing public participation? In which, kind of legislation, whether it is petroleum legislation or environmental legislation or health legislation, where is the subject of public participation touched? Okay. And when it comes to institutions, do the government recognize, institutions? And sometimes the government wants communities to be organized, but it does not, support and show how these communities have to be organized. And if you look at other jurisdictions like, forest, you'll find that for you to manage a forest as a community, you have to organize yourself in what we call community forest associations, come up with participatory forest management. So what happens when it is in upstream? How do we organize ourselves as communities in what form, so that we can also effectively participate, in these, processes? And are we considered in the first, place? So policy, legislation, regulations, institutions is quite critical. The second thing is about, the participation rights and representation. Is participation when my friend from Environmental Sun Frontier Scholar meeting we attend, is that a participation? Or it is the contribution of our ideas and concerns that need to be taken into consideration, or is it the attendance list alone? Okay. And many times when you look at these processes, what matters to the government and what matters to the upstream petroleum companies, it is the attendance list, but it is not the content of our concerns, our issues, and the contribution that will determine, the decisions and the actions to be taken. Okay? Because they have already made a decision. So our role as community is just to come to be told that you've attended and you've signed, and that is what they said. And they'll always say, but you came for that meeting, you signed, why are you complaining now? But when you look at the decisions and actions that are taken in that process, there's nothing from, the community. Sometimes the communities, especially the marginalized and disadvantaged, want to participate, but they don't have the financial resources supportive of their participation. So participate, we should find mechanisms of either taking these participatory whatever into their places, or finding means of getting, them to do certain, things. And when we come up with environmental management plans or environmental health and safety, plans, we need also to see what financial means can we give them.
From the academic perspective, I share the sentiments with the engineer. We have a long way to go. The companies, from their perspective, have got policies, they have got the right trainings and all that. But I think the national level, the coordination is really where we have a problem. In terms of disaster preparedness, my message is that everybody here today, thank you very much for coming, but we have a lot more to do, and we need to now basically wake up and say, all these things are fine. We are at a stage in our development in our country that we have moved forward. Before the 2007 OSHA Act came into place, the one that we had before that was pre-colonial. It was actually the Factories Act before that. So there was, in between that time, we had never developed any new legislation. And that just basically tells us how laid back we are, and we just take things for granted and we just say everything will be fine. I think everything will not be fine. The stakes are much higher. We must, as a community and as a society, basically wake up and say that the impact will be significantly more. We really need to make time and basically make it say that it's our business. This is going to impact our livelihoods. It's going to impact our future, and we need to basically rise up to that. Thank you very much.
We realized that as a company, we needed to have a social license to operate. That we cannot just think about the pipeline without thinking about the people. So we have a relationship with the community where the pipeline passes. So that is our base where we stand. So in terms of our operations, our pipeline affects the people directly because it passes through people's land. So for 40 years as a company, we've not had a department that really deals with the people. So that informed the formation of the foundation. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. So in terms of what we do, our operations are basically, it's like community engagements. So, and then it has a budget. So as a company, we have a moral responsibility to give back socially and in terms of environment. So we give 1% of our budget towards corporate social investment or responsibility, as you wish to call it. So, and this is given to the communities through, community engagement. So we go to the communities and we develop a relationship. So we have quarterly community engagement forums where we interact with the community and talk to them about our operations as a company and how we interface. So one of the things that we talk to them about is, like, for example, issues of safety along the pipeline. And how can we be co-partners? So from those meetings, we get to understand that they also have needs. We appreciate the fact that as a company, we are not government, as in to our problems. I mean, as much as we have a budget, that's what I want to say, it's not our responsibility to entirely take the burden of the community, but we have a responsibility to give back something small. So we ask them to come up with programs that are community driven and will have a shared value for the company and for the community. That then we have the role of CSR. We explain to them that development can be interrupted, that this is a pipeline and anything can happen to you as a community. So from that, we develop interventions that are meaningful to the community. So they send proposals to us as a company, and then we get to fund them based on that.
The Extractive Baraza has had similar functions before. The first one discussed revenue sharing. We looked at local content. Today, we have been looking at environmental health and safety. There is need to link all these discussions because some of the issues that are coming out here in terms of revenue, in terms of access to resources and and the health and environmental matters then need to find room and be able to link with all those areas. As an authority, and we have been told from yesterday that there are different ways of looking at these things. One, looking at the legal and prosecution levels, looking at issues of compliance assistance, and where necessary, looking at issues of incentives to those who are complying with the regulations. As an authority, I can tell you or assure you that we are looking at all those areas. And as my colleague has mentioned, we're looking at it from a multi-stakeholder approach, where we have different people with different mandates coming together to be able to tackle some of these things. In that way, we'll be able to achieve some degree and level of achievement and sustainability for that matter. So we take these extractive barazas seriously ourselves, and we look forward to the proceedings of these barazas so that we can see what it is that the authority has to take up and be able to respond to some of those issues. And on behalf of the Director General and all NEMA fraternity, we'd like to thank Daktari and the Extractive Baraza team for organizing this fora, because they help us to get to understand the concerns that the public has, and it is out of that then we are able to develop appropriate tools, appropriate mechanisms, and strategies to be able to address the issues that we are talking about. We know that there are emerging issues, and as we develop and review these tools that we have, we'll be able to take on board some of those emerging issues and be able to have a much more comprehensive framework that we need to put in place to be able to address the environmental matters in this country. The environment is for us all. It is our responsibility as government and the public and private sector to take our roles in respecting, but also taking care of the environment for now and future generations.
We understood and we clarified the dynamics of industry, academia, government, and NGOs around the knowledge, power, money, and rights dynamics. I want to make a point. Nobody on its own is complete. You are not complete in a bubble. You are possibly sufficient, but you cannot be proficient. And neither can you be efficient. I'll say it again. None of you in your different bubble is complete. You might be sufficient, but you can never be proficient, and you can definitely never be efficient. There's a reason why NGOs are very enthusiastic. It's all about the rights. But in their enthusiasm, they lack the knowledge why some things just don't work the way they think it should. NGO wants to start making money from next week, but without the knowledge from academia, the maturation time for revenue in the oil and gas sector minimum is 10 years. So you are screaming in anger because you want to fight your rights, but you've lacked the knowledge of practicality and reality. And so fundamentally, for you to be complete, you need to partner with the other party in the room. So NGO needs some knowledge. NGOs need some money. Well, they've showed us already how much money they need. They want to increase from 5% to 10%. Okay? Just the same way academia needs money. Academia needs to understand people's rights. So for compromise to happen, you cannot operate in a bubble. Now, the next point is this. Never make a mistake to think the reason you are here is critically and only for Kenya. That will be the biggest mistake we'll make in this room. Whatever you're doing here is got a propensity to impact the East African space and potentially the African space. environmental sustainability is not about mitigating your output. It's equally about reducing your input in the first place. Because if you reduce your input, automatically your waste is reduced. How much energy do you use? How much water do you use? Your input in a system impacts on your output. There is so much focus on waste and air pollution, but what went into the system? So as an environmentalist, it's a fatal flaw that is only concentration and focus on the output. For true sustainability in the environment, you have to consider the input, the process, and the output. Absolutely important.
That is fantastic, especially the various of actors within the forum.
Did the forum meet all your expectations?
It did, because the level of engagement and interaction was very educative.
Did you face any challenges or issues from the forum?
The challenges, I think, time, there was a lot to discuss and engage on, but because of time, some of the discussion had to be rushed up.
Okay. Was the forum well within the scope of the EHS paper?
Yes, it was.
Would you be interested in participating in more policy dialogues?
As somebody developed advocacy, that is a part of the business that I am in, so that is very obvious.
So what would be your final recommendation or comments for this forum?
My final recommendation would be to, especially the panel discussion, there should be a few panelists, but the discussion should be more intense between the panelists and the participants, or use a number of panelists to increase the level of interaction.
My experience of the forum has been remarkable. It's been quite high, I must admit, in terms of the level of engagement with the people, the organization that was put into the forum, and you know, the issues, the themes that people discussed all make it very important for us, and therefore informs my decision to rank it very high.
Did the forum meet all your expectations?
I would say it met most of my expectations in terms of putting across the EHS message to the audience on what EHS means to the industry, the oil and gas industry, and also to, aside from the players as well, to the community. Yeah, so to that extent, I think that it met my expectations.
So what have you benefited from the forum?
The main benefit that I have had from the forum is networking with different players from the different sectors, the downstream and midstream. That is very essential for collaboration, especially when it comes to designing a disaster risk reduction framework. All those players coming together, and therefore meeting them here and having discussions with them provides that opportunity for future discussions with them. I think that was a significant takeaway for me from this event.
Okay. So was the forum well within the scope of the EHS paper that was shared?
Certainly yes, because you set out to look into the perspectives, the experiences and the propositions, and I think on all three areas they were well articulated by the different speakers and the different sets of panel discussions that you had, and I think that I must admit was well done.
Would you be interested in participating in more policy dialogues?
Definitely, yes. It's good to participate. Only through participation can you influence the nature of debate and therefore the actions and activities that follow thereafter.
Do you have any final recommendation or comments for this forum moving forward?
I think we still need more discussion around the EHS subject because from the reactions from the people, you realize that there are certain misinformation or misunderstanding around EHS hazards and risks, especially that affect or potentially can affect the community, and that requires a lot more messaging, targeting the community members to a larger extent, so that more awareness, more education can take place to be able to improve understanding and awareness of the local people or the communities that are potentially affected by the projects that are being done in the petroleum sector.
I'm very grateful to have taken part in this discussion because this is actually an emerging area whereby there's expectations from the community. We're also learning, and also we also need to meet these expectations. So it was quite a useful engagement. I purpose just to come for like maybe half a day, but I found myself staying up to the end of this discussion. Yeah.
So did the forum meet all your expectations?
Okay, my expectations were met. Yeah, it's just that my concern was that, it seemed like the forum was very much on the government. It's like the expectation is like it was a forum prepared just to come and ask many questions on the government, and it's like the community has no role to play on the same. Yeah, but I think we did our best just to let them know that in the Constitution and even in the Environmental Management Law, that is the Environmental Management and Coordination Act, that everybody has a right to a clean and healthy environment, and they also have a responsibility to enhance and also guard that environment. So they were playing their role, but in any sense, we are in an ecosystem, and in the future, I expect to see or hear from the community what they're also doing in also addressing these issues that are emerging from this new sector, that is the extractive sector.
So did you face any challenges or issues from the forum?
Well, I don't know what you mean by challenges. Yeah, because like most of the questions that came up are the ones that we expect. In fact, I think much of the time we were doing much of it was firefighting. What I feel is that we need more time, like let's say, to be able to explain exactly what we are doing, the tools, and once we understand the context and the audience that we are going to address, it becomes easy to package the whole information so that the understanding comes out clearly that NEMA does this, and again, NEMA plays a coordinative role. It is not that NEMA addresses all the issues. We have to work with other lead agencies, like this is the oil and gas sector. We are talking about coal mining. There's the Ministry of Petroleum. We are talking about Water Resource Management Authority when it comes to effluent. We're talking about air quality, issues of areas of environmental significance, where we have the Kenya Wildlife Services. So it's actually a multi-stakeholder tool, and there are quite a number of tools that we're also developing for addressing these issues, apart from the strategic environmental assessment, and also apart from also environmental impact assessment that everybody seems to know. There are issues that address the gender and also people living with disability. We also need to know about the aspects of health impact assessment, environmental and social safeguards. There are quite a number of tools which are being developed to be able to deal with all the impacts that are going to come from this sector. So my concern was that it looked like a forum where the government was being bashed. Yeah, but we tried to meet all the expectations, and I think at the end of the meeting I actually saw that it was a forum that actually helped them to understand. We got their issues. We know that there are some guidelines that we need to come up with, like the public participation guidelines, and where there's no representation on or if there are issues on the ground, what we need to do to respond to these issues as NEMA and also as a government. Yeah,
so what have you benefited from the forum?
Okay, actually, I learned a lot in the sense that we have you might be thinking that you're doing the best to address environmental issues at the ground, but in the real sense, when you work hard, it's also good to get it was like a feedback opportunity to come and learn what the community is actually seeing, what we are doing, and actually what are the gaps, what we need to do better. So it was more or less like a feedback platform, and also an opportunity to know the gaps that we need to address.
So would you be interested in participating in more policy dialogues?
Of course, I definitely have to be, because we take part in implementing, NEMA has the mandate to implement all policies that relate to the environment. Yeah, and we also contribute in developing these policies, of course. We are looking forward to the other barazas. In fact, when we were having lunch, I told one of my colleagues that next time we need to have this baraza under a tree so that it really becomes a real baraza. So we are looking forward to future engagements, and I think as we continue engaging with the community, they keep on understanding what we are doing and also what they expect even from TALO, and even from what their role they need to play. So with this kind of engagement, it will keep on helping to have a sustainable development in this sector.
So do you have any final recommendation or comments for this forum?
Well, my recommendations would be like next time when you try your best to have at least all the relevant agencies take part in the forum, because like when you're talking about such a emerging and a new sector like the extractives, there are quite a number of items that I felt that were not covered, like the petroleum bill, which actually addresses quite over very many environmental and health issues, and it's also proposed to the formation of some new agencies like Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. We also didn't hear much about the local content,